He awoke covered in ash. A fine grey dust coated his throat, a harsh testament to a forgotten thirst. The sun, a malevolent red eye, stared down at him from a sky choked with smoke. The familiar trappings of his life were gone. The tailored suits, the opulent mansion, the hushed whispers of power. Here there was only silence and heat. He rose, his limbs heavy and unfamiliar. Panic, a cold serpent, began to coil in his gut. Where was he? What was this place? Memories, fragmented and blurry, shimmered at the edges of his mind. A deal gone wrong, a scream, then nothing. He stumbled forward, the ground cracking beneath his feet. Skeletal trees, twisted and gnarled, clawed at the unforgiving sky. The air hung heavy, thick with the stench of decay and regret. This wasn't life, he realized with a growing sense of dread. This was something else. He was no longer among the living. The realization descended upon him like a shroud. He was dead. But how? Why? The questions swirled, unanswered and unwelcome. He looked at his hands, expecting to see them skeletal, translucent, but they were as he remembered them, flesh and bone. Yet he felt different, lighter, as if gravity itself had loosened its grip. He wasn't alone. In the distance, a line of figures snaked across the desolate landscape. They moved with a strange, shuffling gait, their heads bowed as if in perpetual mourning. Hope, a fragile flicker, sparked within him. Perhaps they held the answers he sought. He began to walk towards them, his steps hesitant at first, then gaining a desperate urgency. As he drew closer, he could hear the faint echo of their despair, a low, mournful hum that seemed to emanate from the very air. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced him. What awaited him at the end of this macabre procession? He joined the end of the queue, an unwelcome newcomer to their silent communion. No one acknowledged his presence, but he felt their collective grief pressing down on him, suffocating him. The closer he got to the front, the clearer their forms became. They weren't monsters as he'd initially feared, they were people. Men and women from all walks of life, their faces etched with regret and weary resignation. He saw a young mother clutching a child to her breast, her eyes hollow and filled with an unbearable sadness. A warrior, his armor rusted and broken, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Each face told a story of loss, of shattered dreams and broken promises. And as he looked at them, a chilling realization dawned on him. He recognized them. They were people he had known, people he had used, people he had destroyed, his victims. The queue snaked towards a river of fire, its molten surface reflecting the tormented sky above. A single dilapidated boat waited at the river's edge, its oars manned by a skeletal figure shrouded in shadow. This was death, he realized, his blood turning to ice in his veins, not as a grim reaper, but as a ferryman, guiding lost souls to their final destination. One by one, the figures boarded the boat, each offering a silent plea for mercy to the unyielding figure at the helm. He watched as a young woman, her face streaked with tears, reached a trembling hand towards the ferryman. He took it, not with cruelty, but with a cold, indifferent finality. Then she was gone, swallowed by the fiery depths. His turn was coming. Terror, raw and primal, clawed at his throat. He tried to pull back, to flee, but an unseen force held him fast. He was trapped, caught in the inexorable current of his own making. There was no escape. As the boat drew closer, the heat from the river became unbearable, scorching his skin through his clothes. He could feel the eyes of the damned upon him, their whispers carried on the wind. Murderer, liar, thief. Each accusation struck him like a physical blow, a testament to the sins he could no longer outrun. He remembered the faces he had betrayed, the lives he had ruined in his relentless pursuit of power. He saw the grieving widow, her eyes hollowed by his greed, the orphaned child left to fend for itself on the streets. He heard the echoes of their pain, their anger, their despair, and in that moment, he understood. This wasn't punishment, this was justice. And his feet moved without conscious thought, carrying him aboard the vessel of the damned. The ferryman, his skeletal face hidden beneath his hood, didn't spare him a glance as he pushed off from the shore. The boat rocked precariously, its timbers groaning under the weight of their collective despair. He looked back at the shore, at the endless queue of souls still awaiting their turn. He saw her standing right at the end. His wife. Her face, once full of love, now wore the same haunted expression as the others. He opened his mouth to call out to her, to apologize for everything, but the words died in his throat. What good were apologies now? He had made his choices, and now he had to face the consequences. He was beyond redemption. The river of fire deposited them before a colossal gate, its iron bars twisted and blackened by the fires of eternity. Obsidian towers stretched towards the heavens, their peaks lost in the swirling smoke. Before them, a grand staircase carved from white marble led to a hall of unimaginable grandeur. This was the underworld, and he was about to face its ruler. As he climbed the steps, each footfall echoing with the weight of his sins, he felt a presence behind him. Turning slowly, he found himself face to face with the ferryman. The hood had fallen back, revealing a skull stripped of flesh, its empty sockets burning with a cold, unearthly fire. "He waits," hissed the ferryman, his voice like the grinding of tombstones. "And he knows your heart." The hall was vast and imposing, its vaulted ceilings lost in shadow. Pillars of black obsidian rose from the polished marble floor, each engraved with scenes of unimaginable torment. At the far end, seated upon a throne of bone and iron, sat Hades, lord of the underworld. His eyes, two burning coals, pierced through him, stripping him bare, exposing every dark secret, every wicked thought. He fell to his knees, his body trembling with a fear he had never known in life. Before him stood not a man but a god of death, of judgment, of eternal retribution, and he was about to be judged. "You have led a life of deceit," boomed Hades, his voice echoing through the hall. "Your hands are stained with the blood of innocence. Your soul is black with corruption." He tried to speak, to beg for mercy, but no words came out. What words could possibly atone for the horrors he had inflicted upon the world? "There is no forgiveness for one such as you," declared Hades, his voice devoid of emotion. "Only justice." He gestured towards a chasm that opened in the floor, its depths swirling with shadows and the screams of the damned. He could feel the heat of the abyss on his skin, smell the stench of sulfur and decay. This was his fate, to be cast into the abyss, to suffer for all eternity. As the guards dragged him to the edge of the abyss, he looked at Hades, a single question burning in his heart. "Why?" he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. Hades gazed at him with cold, unwavering eyes. "Because," he said, his voice echoing with the weight of ages, "the abyss gazes also into you." And with that, he was cast into the abyss, his scream swallowed by the darkness. Judgment had been passed, and the abyss had claimed its own.